if you constantly worried about what everybody else got to say, if you constantly got your eyes on what everybody else doing, you ain't getting no money. When it comes down to closing a deal, I get it done. Every single one. I'm just going to find you a
Hey, welcome to another episode of Coinology. And I am so excited to be sitting here next to none other than Dr. Lipman. You guys give it up for Dr. Lipman. This episode is a super special episode for me because I am such a huge proponent for the work that Dr. Lipman does. So much so that I am actually personally a patient of Dr. Lipman's. And I always say that to him and his wife whenever I see them. I'm like, I was a patient. Dr. Lipman is probably one of the most sought after physicians in the space of uterine fibroids. And I know that he has a specialty in other areas, and we'll talk about that here shortly. But Dr. Lipman changed my life. I gave birth to my daughter 14 years ago. And during that time, we found out while I was pregnant that I had a huge fibroid. I had multiple fibroids, but one of them was so large that it was covering the opening of my cervix. And I ended up having to have a cesarean. But the thing about it is, and after that, they ended up removing the fibroid a year later. So 13 years ago, they removed it. But the key part of this is they were able to see that this fibroid was blocking my cervix. Back in the day, let's say we were back in the 1800s, and they weren't able to see that. What would probably have happened is that I would have probably died in childbirth.
Yes.
Or my daughter would have died in childbirth, right?
Absolutely.
Fibroids are very, very, very serious things. And I know that we hear about it a lot, but we don't know the seriousness because fibroids also can cause cancer too, correct?
Well, when you look at someone that has fibroids, you don't know 100% that they're fibroids. Usually they are. They're way more common, fortunately, than cancer. Occasionally, cancer can lurk in a uterus that has fibroids too. So fortunately, that's a very uncommon thing.
But it really hit home when I found out that basically if I had lived 100 years ago, I probably would have died giving birth to my daughter. And Dr. Lipman changed my life because in addition to that, when women struggle with fibroids, they also struggle with very heavy periods, which can cause debilitating lifestyles for us. I mean, you don't know what you can wear, where you can go, what you can do. My life was pretty much very limited. And so until I met Dr. Lipman, my life was, I can't even express how damaging it was at that time, as a woman. And I'm sure all of the other women out here can relate. As I was sharing with Dr. Lipman, 9 out of 10 of my girlfriends struggle with fibroids. And before I met Dr. Lipman, I was told that my only option at that time was a hysterectomy.
Right. And that's what most women hear about. That's the only thing they'll hear. They'll hear, you can undergo hysterectomy, be done with it. And that's it. And there is a tremendous other option that's completely non-surgical that you underwent, that you can get your life back without any surgery, go home the same day with a Band-Aid, get the relief of symptoms you're looking for, avoid the risks and long recovery of operation, because we can talk about what happens to women when they lose their uterus, particularly at a young age.
Mm-hmm. And that was the part I was afraid of, Dr. Lipman. I was so young.
The average age of hysterectomy in this country is 39. And I spoke not long ago at Tuskegee, and I met 3 women less than 30 had already had a hysterectomy. None of them wanted it, but they were so tired of dealing with the stuff that you mentioned, the heavy periods, the pelvic pain. Everything they did revolved around their menstrual. Whether they worked or not, whether they had relations or not, whatever they did, they
vacations,
had
everything.
Everything revolved around it. And they knew they went through it each month, and then it was coming up again. And so there's an incredible physical thing that happens to women because they lose so much blood, they lose iron and hemoglobin. So now they're chronically fatigued and anemic. And so there's a physical burden that they bear. but there's also this mental burden that they bear because they know that it's going to happen again. Each and every month, they're going to have to go through this. They're going to have to fight through this horrible period every month, and it's mentally challenging. So there's both of that going on, and they go to their gynecologist, and some of them, like these 3 women that I met, less than 30, they were just tired of dealing with it, and I understand that. But women are entitled to know all their options, not just the surgical ones. And that's where we come in, trying to educate women that no matter what your gynecologist tells you, you do not need to have a hysterectomy for fibroids. You can have this great UFE procedure and get your life back without any surgery and keep all your parts.
And keep everything, because I was so super young. And to have thought about doing that then was traumatic to even think about it. But Dr. Lipman, let me ask you this. The rates of this fibroid issue, is it higher in African Americans?
No question about it. 80% or so of African American adult women have these fibroids. So it's common in all women, but it's particularly common in the African American woman. And that's who we spend a lot of time trying to talk to, just so they have the information. Because information is power.
Information is, and that's what today is all about, is providing the information. Before we go into the information and where we currently are with fibroids and some of the newest developments that have come out around that, let's talk a little bit about you, Dr. Lipman. Where are you from?
I'm originally from Rochester, New York.
Okay. Because, it was funny. My producers were out there trying to prepare for today's segment, and they couldn't find much about you out there besides all your accolades. So I don't know that people really know a lot about Dr. Lipman. Or were you your only child? What type of family did you grow up in?
My dad was a physician, primary care physician, and my mom was a nurse. So I grew up in kind of a medical family. And I only wanted to do 2 things in life, either be a doctor or be a professional baseball player. And I played baseball through college, a little bit after college, but I realized I wasn't going to make it. There were a lot of really good people out there, played year-round in the South. And so I focused on medicine. And I have one younger brother, and so it's just the 2 of us. And
is he a doctor too?
He's a lawyer and a judge.
Okay.
So we're, I've been in Atlanta now the last 31 years. So even though I didn't grow up here in the South, I'm kind of a common law.
I feel the same way. I feel like I'm a Georgia peach, even though I didn't grow up here. And I saw that you went on to Georgetown.
I did. I went to medical school at Georgetown, and then I did my radiology residency at Brigham and Women's Hospital, Harvard Medical School. And then I went to Yale for a year to do specific training in interventional radiology. And then I came to Atlanta 31 years ago.
Amazing. Now, explain, isn't Harvard and Yale, aren't they competitors?
They're very competitive.
So how did that work out for you?
I spent 4 years at Harvard and 1 year at Yale, so I guess... So
you feel more of a Harvard...
I actually went to a couple of the Harvard-Yale football games. It's very competitive, those football games. And so I even though I went to Yale, I wear my Harvard crimson just because I spent more time there. But I have really good friends at Yale, and we kind of kid about that.
Did you meet your wife there?
No, actually, I met my wife. I did 1 year of medicine, internal medicine in Philadelphia, and I met her there.
Okay. And then children, any kids? Or?
Yeah, we have 3 kids. My oldest is a nurse practitioner at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. She works on the airway team with an amazing ENT surgeon who does reconstructive airways on these kids that were preemies and in the NICU, and now they need reconstructed airways. And so she works with him. My middle daughter is out in Phoenix at the Phoenix School for the Deaf. She's a deaf interpreter. She's not deaf herself, but she's her training is in American Sign Language, so she teaches children American Sign Language. And my youngest is in the wine and spirits industry in Nashville, working for a company called Lipman Distributors, which is no relation, but just ironic that it's the same last name as ours. That's
amazing. That's amazing. So how did you end up choosing the field of study in medicine? So I know that it's very competitive when you guys are in medical school trying to determine where you would stay and study. How did you determine that you wanted to work with the women?
Well, initially I was at Georgetown as a medical student, and I heard about a gentleman that was doing these amazing procedures that replaced surgery. And he was working at a small hospital in Virginia. And so I wrote to him and I said, I'm a medical student. Do you ever take medical students? I have elective time. Do you ever take medical students and, have them observe and so forth? And he was really touched by that. And he said, oh, absolutely. I've never had a medical student before, but yes, I would love to do that. And turns out he is now one of the iconic people in our specialty. His name is Barry Katzen, and he was the founder of the Miami Heart and Vascular Institute in Miami, and just a worldwide known interventional radiologist, a tremendous individual.
And you didn't know him personally?
No, I didn't know him at all.
You just said, okay, I'm going to write him.
At the time, he was in this small hospital in Alexandria, Virginia, doing his thing. And I spent time with him. I'm like, wow, I want to be like him. And so I went into interventional radiology, and then I started doing these procedures that replaced surgery. And it's cutting edge medicine without the cutting, is what we say. And so it's all done from the inside. I think it's the coolest thing in medicine that there is. And I really enjoy doing what I do.
And it's painless. It's painless because I remember when I had my procedure, all I remember is counting down, counting back. I saw you and your nurse standing above me. I think you guys had cracked a joke. And to this day, I'm still trying to remember what that joke was, but I can't remember it. And then I woke up.
Yeah, if you talk to my wife, I have one of the corniest senses of humor. So it was probably a very bad dad joke. But
and so but the key thing is you did not know him. You were not afraid.
No.
You were not hesitant. You said, let me just take my chances and send him a letter.
Exactly. I just, I didn't know what his response would be. And I think he was really touched by it because we've now, over the years, he's a huge deal in our field. He's, every award possible, he has won it. And he is very forward-thinking, entrepreneurial, and just created this amazing vascular center that's worldwide reputation. But, he was so humble, and I think he really was touched by it. He wrote me a really nice letter not long ago.
I know he's extremely proud of the work that you're doing.
And that's what he said. It was kind of like a father. It was like, getting that, kind of acknowledgement from your dad.
But Dr. Lipman, I don't know if you know this, you're not just a doctor. I don't know if you know, but so it is told if you're going, I remember when I found out that I had a fibroid issue, and my gynecologist said to me, if you're going to go to anybody, you have to go to Dr. Lipman. At that time, I believe you were in Emory. You were with Emory.
Right.
And you were off on, I think, South Atlanta Road or something at that time. And she mentioned to me, women from all over the country fly in to Dr. Lipman to have him to see you. So the fact that you live here in Atlanta and he's in your insurance coverage, I can't even think of the term now, you have to go to him. And so that is the word out there from the celebrities, influencers, leaders, just the everyday woman is Dr. Lipman can help you. So I'm sure he's very proud of the work because, again, you're not just a doctor. You are sought out all over the country.
Yeah, we've been very privileged to care for women. Pre-COVID, we would see women even outside the United States, patients from Africa, the Caribbean, sometimes Europe, but all throughout the United States. And if somebody's coming to me from out, in the United States, we try to tell them, there's usually somebody, if it's a big city somewhere in the United States, we can say, well, if you want, there's somebody not that far from you, and we can give them the contact of that interventional radiologist in that city. And sometimes they will do that. And other times they'll say, you know what, I want to come to you. I've heard about what you've done and what you're doing, and we want to come to Atlanta. And fortunately, Delta you can pretty much fly nonstop to pretty much almost anywhere. And so we've been very fortunate to see women from all over coming to our center, the Atlanta Fibroid Center.
And how many locations do you have?
We just have the one location for doing the procedures. We do have an office share situation in Macon, so we do see some people that allow access to Florida and Middle and South Georgia, Alabama. And so, because a lot of those people don't really want to come to Atlanta, even though we'll see them remotely if they want, for the consultation. But oftentimes people say, well, I want to see you. I want to, if you're going to, quote, operate on me, I want to see who that is.
That's very important.
And so we say, yeah, okay, well, you can see us in Atlanta, or you can come to Macon. We'll be happy to see you there too.
Now, I saw that in 2005, you actually branched off and started your own practice. So what was the mentality there? Because I know most doctors focus on just being a doctor. Running your own practice and becoming a business owner, that's a whole nother situation, right?
Right. Well, I do volunteer at Morehouse School of Medicine. It's a tremendous place. And I hoping to try to influence some curriculum to get business principles, just the basic principles, into medical school curriculum. Because I've learned, I didn't know anything about business, and I've learned so much over the years that I wish somebody would have given me some of the basics, even in medical school, because that would really have been helpful and important. I learned a lot about business over the years, but that was something that I initially got a team. I knew the clinical side of stuff really well when I went out on my own, but I didn't have any business knowledge. So I would basically ask people to kind of help me, you form your team. And they were business people. A really good friend of mine is in the hotel industry, hospitality industry, owns hotels. He has helped me tremendously on the business side of things, because you got to know that too.
Yeah, business, that's the part that most people think. They think because I'm a great dentist or I'm a great hairstylist or I'm a great doctor or whatever, I can just go and open my own practice. If you don't understand the principles of business, you're going to struggle. What was some of the biggest challenges you had when you first opened?
Well, certainly, financially, it's a big commitment. Our equipment is very expensive. And in fact, when we built the center where we are now in Smyrna, and we have this really expensive equipment, and I went with GE, even though I was more of a Philips Siemens guy. I'd worked on those two different platforms. I hadn't worked with GE, but they came in, they did a really nice, their equipment is really nice, and they gave me a nice deal. And then I looked at the kind of specifics, and I was like, what is this line item here? It's an extra $100,000. And it's that's a lot of money, obviously.
It is.
And they were like, oh, well, that's a bond that you have to put up so that we can do this. And I'm like, well, is this what you do with hospitals and other places? Because I'd never heard of this extra bond. I know the cost in renting the equipment and so forth. Oh, no, that's specifically for you. And I'm like, well, why do I have to, do I have that burden? And they're like, well, frankly, Doc, we don't think you're going to be here 6 months from now, because most businesses fail. And so that was their insurance policy.
Well, and I think one of the things we can take from that is, one, pay attention. So most businesses fail because they don't pay attention to the numbers. So paying attention and actually having the confidence to ask the question. So most people are so insecure about what they don't know, they don't ask the question. So, asking questions and so forth, and actually hiring people or surrounding yourself around people who actually know the business better than you.
Absolutely.
So what was your biggest challenge, though, when you first started the business as far as staying afloat?
Well, fortunately, I had a reputation at, my previous practice, and I wasn't moving to a new town or a new area. So I had a base of, business and people that are here already. And so I was confident that, we were going to be successful, and fortunately we were. But early on, it's rice and beans. You're paid last.
That's right.
And we put everything into the business, and, we were pretty confident. We had a really good product.
And it was the same product then.
Correct. Same product.
Okay.
We just, instead of a hospital, we were gonna be the hospital, because you don't need a hospital for what I do.
What you do, because I think it was an outpatient type situation, right?
Outpatient facility. So we basically replaced the hospital, because the hospital is a very frustrating environment for physicians.
And costly.
And very costly, very inefficient. The inefficiencies at hospitals are legendary. And it's just unnecessary. People don't want to go to hospitals because they're germ-ridden. And even before COVID, it's not the most pleasant environment. And we wanted to make the experience for women. We serve women, particularly women of color. And so we got a bunch of focus groups together and said, forget a hospital. if you're not feeling well and you're going to be cared for in a medical situation, what are the things that are important to you? And so we talked to a lot of women, and quality was obviously important, but that was a given. But the number one thing was privacy. And so all of our patients have their own private room. It's not like, if you look in the outpatient world, and I had a colonoscopy not long ago, it's basically this recovery area with these little flimsy sheets.
Yes, no privacy.
No privacy.
You can hear everyone's conversation around you.
There was one gown for everybody, and I'm 6'4", and there was a woman in the next thing next to me. She was like 300 pounds. We were both coming out of our gowns, and we were looking at each other going, we should be married, because there are no secrets here. And so that was very important. Privacy was important. And, one patient, one nurse. Nurses today are so overworked. They're responsible for so many more than one or two. It's 5 or 6, 7 patients. You can't possibly give first-rate care if you're so stretched thin. So we wanted one patient, one nurse. And so the facility is just geared for women and their whole experience. We want them to say, wow, I felt like I was at the Ritz-Carlton in the Four Seasons. I never felt like this in a healthcare environment. And that's what we do each and every day at the Atlanta Fibroid Center.
I think the individualized care is very important, because I was actually shocked that I actually met Dr. Lipman, because typically in situations like that, you meet your associate doctor, the other doctors that work with you, or your nurse practitioner, but you make it a point after you see all those before you that you actually have a conversation with each. Because I think I just recently came back to visit you, maybe about a year or so ago, because I did want to see, it's been 13 years since I had my last procedure, and I'm like, okay, doc, and you said, well, most people who have that are usually in menopause. You just had it so early that's not the case. So, and that was the part that most people don't talk about. So sometimes you do have to go back after having the initial procedure, correct?
Yes, we try to see everybody at 3 months after. Because if you're good at 3 months, if you can tell things are significantly better or gone completely, and the fibroids are dead, likely I'll never see you again, particularly if you're in your 40s when you have the embolization.
But I was so young.
If you're in your 30s, you have a longer time to menopause. And so we would see you more often. And occasionally fibroids will grow
back. Yeah.
And then you could get a second embolization if necessary. Fortunately, that's not a common thing, but we do see that from time to time, particularly if it's a younger patient. But even 2 embolizations is still way, way better than one surgery.
Than a hysterectomy. And I ended up not having to get the second embolization. But Dr. Lipman, this is the part that I think is the question. Why do you think it is so prevalent in African-American women? What do you think the key factor is?
Well, unfortunately, nobody knows where fibroids come from, and there hasn't been enough research into that. But hopefully we're trying to change that. I have a foundation, Free from Fibroids Foundation, that's trying to push. There is legislation stuck in the House and Senate. It's called the Stephanie Jones Tubb Jones Fibroid Research Education Act, which will hopefully finally bring some funding to this question. But there are several reasons why African American women disproportionately suffer. Fibroids will grow with estrogen. That's why they can grow rapidly during pregnancy, and why they tend not to be an issue for most women once they reach menopause. Estrogen is produced and stored in fat. And so the more body fat you have on you, the more extra estrogen you have on board. And that can make fibroids grow. African-American women get fibroids earlier in life. They get more of them. They tend to be bigger and more numerous and more likely to get hysterectomy. Vitamin D is important in fibroid situations. Vitamin D is actually a hormone, technically. It's not a vitamin, but it's the most powerful anti-fibroid growth hormone that there is. And only 10% of African-American men or women have adequate vitamin D. And so that is a contributing factor. The foods we eat, you can't avoid hormones in the foods, even in the water, but there are certain hormone-rich foods, if you will, red meat, non-organic chicken, dairy. Eating more colored fruits and vegetables, because the colored fruits and vegetables have what are called flavonoids in them. And flavonoids can block an important enzyme in estrogen production. So if you can eat more colored fruits and vegetables, limit or eliminate some of the hormone-rich foods, if you can make sure your vitamin D is adequate, your exercise, lose any excess body fat, so eat well, healthy choices. That is the best, protection against fibroids. African American women typically have more body fat on them than other racial groups. So that's, again, what we try to stress to get them into programs that will help with that. Hair relaxers, now not as much of an importance now because more women are wearing their hair naturally, but back in the day, it was a bigger problem. And if you look at the main ingredient in hair relaxers, it's biochemically almost identical to estrogen. And you're basically getting it right into the vascular scalp. It goes right into the bloodstream.
At least 6 times a year, because African American women typically relax their hair around every 2 months. And so, and I always said, Dr. Lipman, when you can smell and it burns your scalp. So you know that it can't be healthy.
Right.
That you can smell it. One of the things before we move on is the estrogen. So the other thing, I'm not sure if you're aware, but I would say about 20 or so years ago, probably 20, 30 years ago, especially when Planned Parenthood was really big, especially in urban communities, the choice of birth control pills that they gave to all of the young African American women was 77728 orthonovium.
Yep.
And I'm hearing, I don't know if it's true or not, that may also be a contributing factor.
No question, because again, what's in a birth control pill but estrogen and progesterone? So any exogenous extra estrogen is going to do that. Now, when women are struggling with fibroids, the number one reason why women will present is because of heavy periods. It's the number one reason why women have heavy menstruals. So they go to their gynecologist, and almost invariably they're going to be placed on birth control. Now, it's a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, it will tend to, for most women, it'll tend to lighten their flow, which is good. That's why they were put on the birth control pill. But in the background, it's like pouring gas on the fire. It's making the fibroids grow more rapidly than they otherwise would. So while it works for a little while, eventually it's going to the more rapid growth of these fibroids from the extra estrogen, it's going to overwhelm the ability to work any longer. And so then the gynecologist goes, okay, we tried the non-surgical approach to this. Now you need surgery. And it basically comes in 2 flavors. And it depends entirely on a woman's desire for fertility. If she wants children, either possibly or definitely, she gets myomectomy as the option. If she's not interested in kids, no matter what age she is, she gets offered hysterectomy. And that's why the average age is so young, 39 for hysterectomy. And it's just not necessary to do that.
No, it's not. And it's also very hard. Just thinking about at 39 years old, women having to make that final decision, because most women are starting to have children closer and closer to their 40s now.
Right.
Yeah, so that's a tough decision to make. So Dr. Lipman, I'm sure you probably saw this class action lawsuit that Ben Crump just recently launched in regards to the hair relaxer industry. I'm just surprised that there's not more notification, more noise, more discussions. I just wish there was more Dr. Lipmans out here talking. I know when you reached out to me the other day, I went to your IG stories and I saw that you asked the question. Most people are shying away from the conversation around the relaxers and the birth control pills and things of that nature. Why do you think that they're not really talking about this?
Well, they're not talking about it because hysterectomy is a very big business. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. And so imagine a world that is full of candles. Everybody's got a candle. Everybody owns candles. They use candles at home for light. They purchase candles. There's big industries providing those candles. And somebody comes along with an idea, I've got this new invention called a light. I've got electricity. All of a sudden that's so disruptive. The people that own the candle business don't want you to, this newer, better mousetrap. They don't like you at all. And they don't want you to, even though it's better and it's easier and cheaper, what have you, they're very disrupted by that, and they're going to do everything they can to kind of keep that knowledge under wraps. And so that's kind of what we have. We have a much better story. Patients don't want to be in the hospital. They don't want to be operated on. And you can get the relief with this amazing UFE procedure without any surgery at all. You don't need a hospital. You don't need a surgeon. It's tremendous, but yet the gatekeepers of women's health, the gynecologists in general, they don't want you to know about it. And there's a lot of studies out there showing most women, even today, after 25 years of me doing this procedure, it's well proven safe and effective. Most women that go to their gynecologist, even today, will not be told about it at all, even though they all know about it. They just, they're surgeons. They want to operate. And even though this is a much better way to do things, it's completely under wraps.
Yeah, and that's also disturbing because there's a lot of things that I think throughout the years, medical advances that just aren't coming to the forefront that can actually help save lives and reduce the amount of deaths and so forth that are happening, right?
Right.
Dr. Lipman?
It's, I speak all over on this, and, there's a lot of groups that'll say, well, if this were a male condition, if this were, a man,
if this was a white male condition,
it would be over with.
It would be over with.
Right.
I think, and I don't know if you know this, but African-American women are typically the most ignored human on this earth. So our issues, our pain, because even in the medical field, Dr. Lipman, many times when we have issues, pain, or discomfort in the hospitals is ignored. Many times it's being said, it's in our mind, it's in our head. I think Serena Williams talked about what she went through childbirth. And so it's not a surprise to me that this is being ignored for so long. I do want women, Black women particularly, to take ownership and say, stop putting these relaxers in our hair. Don't put them into our baby's hair. Right. Think twice about ingesting additional estrogen into your bodies.
Right. You have to almost be your own health advocate.
That's right.
Nobody knows your body better than you.
That's right.
And if you go to a physician or some healthcare provider and they're not listening to you or you feel dismissed, find another doctor. There are lots of doctors out there. You don't have to continually be ignored or dismissed. If that's happening, find somebody else.
Find someone else.
As I mentioned earlier, I spoke at Tuskegee on this. My contention was, my hypothesis was, at the time the Tuskegee experiment stopped, which was around 1972, it had been going on for 40 years. And so now I'm speaking, a white male physician, speaking in front of several hundred Black women at Tuskegee University. And my hypothesis was, even though in 72, when it was stopped, they said it would never happen again because there's informed consent, and now you're going to have to be informed of all your options and consent to sign this and so forth. And while this was an ugly part of American medicine, it will never happen again. And my contention was, I think it's happening again. Instead of poor male sharecroppers in Alabama who had syphilis and weren't told about penicillin, we have now Black women of all sorts of socioeconomic not being told about UFE and instead unnecessarily getting hysterectomy. It's not that dissimilar. And believe me, I had a lot of angst going up in front of this group, as I say, being white and male.
White and male, but I think you would be, have you reached out to Ben Crump, Attorney Ben Crump?
I haven't, but a number of them came up to me afterwards and they were so appreciative of what I had to say, and it was so heartfelt and warming because I was concerned about it, and they were like, no, it's all about the message. The messengers, no, don't worry about that.
It's the facts behind the message, right?
Yes.
It's even more important, though, I think when people can see it outside of the population that's affected, it rings even louder because that means that it's even more visible. So I think, because I know I just recently, I don't know if you're familiar with the young rapper Takeoff. He was part of the Amigos, and he just recently was killed. You may not know about it, but some of the things that they talked about as far as that's concerned has been talked about for a number of years. But now some white male record label executives are now bringing some things to light, and people are listening because it's not just internal, it's external, which is very, very, very important that we begin to listen and pay attention. And I agree with you. I would see this hysterectomy, the fibroid situation, being very similar to the Tuskegee experiment, because it is so 9 out of 10 women. Well, you said 80%, so it's really 8 out of 10.
Well, at least that. I mean, it certainly could be more, but women are entitled to know all their treatment options for fibroids. They're only getting the surgical options in general. And so, but you are entitled to know all your options. And that's where we try to at least give them the information. Because if you have the information, then you can finally make the best choice.
You can make an educated decision. Now, what about this Stephanie Tubbs person that you mentioned? What was her story? What happened with
Stephanie
her?
Tubbs Jones was in the House of Representatives, and she was pushing this fibroid legislation to finally get some research. She struggled with it herself, as a number of the female representatives. Yvette Clarke from New York, who has taken the mantle because Stephanie passed. And so Yvette Clarke, who's in the House, also suffered with fibroids and is now she's on the House side, and Cory Booker is on the Senate side, trying to get this legislation passed, because it provides, and it's not really big numbers in the scheme of things, it's $30 million a year for 5 years to the NIH to study fibroids, and also in African American women. Even in the studies of fibroids, a lot of them, like the Mayo Clinic, for instance, had a study on fibroids. The vast majority were Caucasian women. And like African American women were underrepresented in a condition that primarily affects them. It was ridiculous. It also directs the CDC to put out information on all treatment options, including UFE, uterine fibroid embolization, that we do, so that it educates the public and physicians on these non-surgical options for fibroids, which is also critical, so that patients can make the best informed decision. They'll know all their options, not just surgery. And one of the things I think is important to point out is that not only do you serve African American women with your the procedure in which the UFE procedure, but you also give back to the community in which you serve, which is extremely important, because sometimes what happens, Dr. Lipman, in business, we find opportunities. So I always tell people, solve a problem, become a millionaire. That is how so many business owners become millionaires, is because they see a problem, they solve it, and they become a millionaire. In this case, you saw a problem, which was the fibroid issue. You were in Atlanta, where there's a larger amount of African American population. You solved it by not developing, but actually offering UFE. And of course, I'm sure you've made a lot of money from doing that. Some people would stop there and go off into the sunset. But what I've seen personally is that you've now taken a percentage of that and put it back in the community. I've seen you work with so many African American underserved organizations and people in the community. And so to talk to me about the mindset of that. Well, I feel a responsibility. That's the women, that's the community I serve. So I want to be a part of that community. As I say, I volunteer at Morehouse School of Medicine. I set up a scholarship there. So every year there's a scholarship in my dad's name, because he was a very strong primary care physician, and Morehouse turns out extraordinary primary care physicians. So every year there's a scholar in my dad's name at Morehouse. I set up a research fund. A very good friend of mine, Simon, who was on the radio here for many years, iconic. Passed away with pancreatic cancer. And I set up a research at Morehouse in pancreatic cancer in his name, because I just didn't know what to do. As a lot of people were, we were just really devastated by his loss. He was such a positive light in the community. I've been privileged to be in the company of some really incredibly positive people, Simon included. Hosea Williams,
You
Herman
were,
Russell.
You were really instrumental. I don't want you to slide over Hosea, because Hosea Feed the Hungry is also a client of my agency here. And I remember when we had the big grand opening and I was producing the press conference, you were one of the top donors into moving them into their new facility. Right. That was a big deal.
Well, it was things. I'm a strong believer in, things don't happen by accident. Because I had been getting this alert from the, I spoke at the CBC, the Black clergy meeting. Every Monday they meet, vicars down, and so I spoke one time there on fibroids and UFE procedure. And so I'm on their email, and I got an alert about, come down this Monday. We're talking. It's really important. And I was free that Monday. I just, I didn't have work on that particular Monday. So I was like, okay, I haven't been in a while. I want to go down there. And so I went, and I walked in, and there was one seat. The place was filled. There was one seat available at one of the back tables. So I sat at that seat, and sitting next to me was Elizabeth Omalami, and Afimo was next to her. And I just struck up a conversation with her, and they were there to speak, to petition, and talk about their plight, because they wanted a new building. They wanted to be in a new facility. They were just overrun where they currently were at. And they tried to go through the normal channels. They went to the Atlanta City Council, and the council, turned them down. And they said, we need $180,000. And so I said, look, I can get you $100,000 if you can get the other 80 from your other donors. And so that's what made that happen. And we were able to get them into their new facility. And I was just there for Halloween. And it's a tremendous building. I mean, it's
gorgeous.
And not only do they do stuff for the food insecurity, I mean, that's just a part of, everybody knows how they help feed the hungry and the food insecure, but they do so much more. They provide job assistance, rental assistance, energy assistance, all the things we kind of take for granted. They help, and they're so important. I mean, they are such an important lifeline.
They're a staple to this community. And I will say this, our agency has been their public relations company for almost upward to a decade. Mrs. Omalami is so much more to me than just a client. And I just feel, I say this all the time, I feel so honored that I'm able to sit at her feet and learn from her, because even in her servitude, in her trying moments, she's still thinking about giving back and making sure that her father's legacy continues. And so, and it's so important to me. I think it's important for all of us to always remember the least of us as we continue to drive and lead and trailblaze into the future.
Well, their work is so amazing. And it's to say, I don't think it was an accident that I was at that meeting, because I normally don't go there. And it was the only seat available was next to her. And it's just, things are not an accident. I was placed there just like I was placed to hear the guy talk about, the first 11 patients that were done for UFE. I mean, I wouldn't have been at that meeting. And when I heard him speak, I'm like, okay, now I know what I'm supposed to be doing.
I believe every interaction is purposed. Whether you understand the purpose for it at that particular moment, it's going to come back. Just like the other day, we were producing one of our other shows for another client, Coinology, and in walks Dr. Lipman. I'm like, Dr. Lipman, you're in the right place. And he came in and enjoyed Coinology with us. And now you're here at Coinology, and who knows where that's going to take, moving forward. I believe every relationship, every connection. And even when I knew that you worked with Hosea and I came in as a patient, I never said, hey, I'm the publicist for Hosea. It was more so about the fact that I trusted you and your skill set, and I knew that would all be 360 degrees and turning. And here we are today. You're sitting in the Coinology studio.
I know it's great. I love the opportunity that to talk about the kind of things we're doing, because I wish everyone knew about it. And the more we have these conversations, the more people will listen and share this information, because it's somewhat of an embarrassing topic. It's one of the reasons why it's not as well known, because who wants to talk about
Nobody
their periods?
talks about that.
I mean, I've had a number of patients say, it wasn't until I was in the midst of this, fibroid issue and I talked to my mom, I never knew my mom.
I never knew. That's the part, Dr. Lipman. I had no idea. So that, you're right. That's a topic that just recently women started feeling comfortable having a conversation. I know you were a huge part of opening the doors for those conversations, but typically no one talked about the fact that they were afraid when they stood up, that the bottom of their pants were going to be full of blood. No one talked about the discomfort. I never knew that my mom and all of my aunts struggled with. I didn't even know my girlfriends and best friends until I talked about, I have to have this procedure. Oh, I had that, and this is what you need to do. I'm like, wow, why are we talking about this?
Taboo for no reason.
Well, it's an embarrassing topic. But Dr. Lipman, what's next? Do you think there's a procedure that will supersede UFE?
It's certainly possible. We're getting less and less invasive all the time, and that's great. That's the progress, and we shouldn't be afraid of that. We should embrace it. And so I hope there is. I hope we continue to innovate and make things better. We'll look back on hysterectomy surgery. Why in the world are we essentially amputating black women, young black women, for benign disease? Now, if it's cancer, hysterectomy is appropriate. But there's no reason in the world we should be doing hysterectomies for benign fibroids. Just shouldn't be doing it. UFE should completely replace all that. But it hasn't yet. It's only scratched the surface. We could be doing...
And you've been doing this for 25
years, and still we're just scratching the surface. There are so many women that we could help around the country that would benefit from this. But that's why we continue doing what we do every day, trying to talk to as many people that will listen, because somebody listening to this will probably say, wow, that's me. I'm suffering with fibroids. I was told I had to have a hysterectomy. It's
right. If it's not them, it's someone that they know.
Exactly.
And we're going to make sure that the information is connected to this podcast so that people can reach out and receive some type of assistance, because you don't have to live like this.
No,
you do not.
That is so important, because you get into this, well, I've just got to push through. This is, I'm getting older. They may think it's an older, I've turned 40 and now my periods are heavy. That just must be my lot in life. I'm just a heavy bleeder. No, that's abnormal.
Or my mom and my aunties all said this is just the way it has to be.
It's not. It's not normal. Even though you've been doing it for a long time and trying to push through it, it's not normal. I can show you what normal is. You have your UFE. It's transformational. You get your life back. People will bring bags of clothing to the appointment. Everything they do revolves around this period, and it's liberating. It's you get the energy back that you haven't had in years. We like when men come out, because while we focus on talking to women and sharing the information with women, men need to hear this too. I remember years ago when I treated Cynthia Bailey, I saw Cynthia and Peter in the office, and this was all televised, so I can say all this. Peter didn't understand what Cynthia was going through. All he could, from his perspective was he wasn't getting relations, because relations really kind of went grinding to a halt for two reasons. One, Cynthia was bleeding so heavily, she was anemic, chronically fatigued and tired, and let's face it, relations is exercise. And second, she was wearing all this padding and gear and adult diapers. She doesn't feel very, even though she's a beautiful model, she didn't feel very sexual wearing diapers and bleeding like she was bleeding. So relations kind of grinded to a halt. And so from Peter's perspective, it's like, well, she must not love me. And that wasn't true at all. She loved Peter, but it was all she could do to get through the day.
She was suffering.
And once I did the UFE procedure on her, she got her life back. Everything changed. She told me, I gave her sexy back.
So much so that she got married again to someone else.
Yeah, exactly.
So she really got her sexy back.
Yep.
So Dr. Lipman, as we come to a close, what would you like the population to get from this podcast?
Well, the most important point, I think, is that no matter what your gynecologist tells you, if you're suffering with fibroids, you don't have to have surgery. UFE, uterine fibroid embolization, is one of the biggest medical breakthroughs. It's completely outpatient, non-surgical. It's about a 30-minute procedure, 30, 40 minutes. Patients will spend a few hours at our center and go home not only with their uterus, just a Band-Aid. That's it, a Band-Aid at the top of their leg. A short
and back to work the next day.
Short recovery, back to their work, back to life, without any operation. Because women that had hysterectomies, they can suffer psychologically, like a man being castrated. They can suffer sexually, a lot of sexual dysfunction, urinary leaking. If you go to where they sell adult diapers, you should see a picture of my dad. He's 95. You won't see a picture of him. You'll see a picture of someone who looks like you, attractive, young African-American woman. Why? Because that's the market for adult diapers. Women that have had hysterectomies now need to wear adult diapers. I mean, it's tragic. I have an ad from Depends. It's a very attractive, thin African-American woman, and she's scooching on over her adult diaper, these skinny jeans. And it's some cutesy thing like, they'll never know what you're wearing. It's like, well, wait a minute. Why in the world does she need a diaper? That's the question that needs to be answered. It's so unnecessary. You do not need to have surgery, and we've got to get that information out there.
Get it out there. We need to get it out there.
Because you're entitled to know all the stuff, all the options, so that you can make the best decision for you.
That's right. And I'm very thankful that my gynecologist did give me all of the information so that I could make that decision. Especially at the age that I was. But Dr. Lipman, thank you so much for coming out. I appreciate you taking the time to come down, share some tips that you had from business, and also to educate the Coinology viewers. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll see you guys next time on Coinology.
You ain't getting no money if you constantly worried about what everybody else got to say. If you constantly got your eyes on what everybody else doing, you ain't getting no money. When it comes down to closing a deal, I get it done. Every single one.